Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Harvey, let me tell you something tonight that might surprise you, might hurt a little, but if you understand it, it can save you a whole lot of confusion. There are men out here who don't pull away because they don't care. They pull away because they care too much. See, when a man loves you deeply, when your presence starts to matter more than his pride, more than his routine, more than his comfort, something inside him gets shaken, and that one single trait that can make him step back is emotional depth, not drama, not neediness, emotional depth. When a man loves deeply, fear doesn't disappear, it actually gets louder. That's something most people don't tell you. We like to believe love makes a man brave, confident, unshakable, but real love does the opposite first. It strips him down. It puts him face to face with parts of himself he's been avoiding. A man who has never truly opened his heart before can feel strong chasing, winning, impressing. But when love becomes real, when it starts to matter, fear walks into the room and takes a seat right next to his feelings. This fear doesn't come from weakness. It comes from risk. Loving deeply means he can lose deeply. It means your absence would hurt more than his pride can handle. It means your disappointment would cut deeper than failure ever did. And for a man who has learned to survive by controlling outcomes, emotions like that feel dangerous. He starts to realize you're not just a chapter, you're a turning point. And turning points require decisions, responsibility, and courage. A man in this position may start asking himself questions he's never had to answer before. Am I good enough? Can I keep her happy? What if I mess this up? What if I give her everything and she leaves? Those questions don't always come out as words. They come out as distance, silence, missed calls, and emotional walls. He pulls back not because love is gone, but because it suddenly feels bigger than him. Deep love forces a man to confront his past, old heartbreaks, childhood wounds, moments where he felt abandoned or not chosen, all come rushing back. Loving you opens doors he locked a long time ago. And if he never healed what's behind those doors, he panics. Fear tells him stepping back is safer than stepping forward. Fear convinces him distance will protect him from pain. This is why some men act confusing when they love deeply. One moment he's present, affectionate, intentional. The next moment he's cold, distracted, unavailable. Inside, there's a battle happening. Love is pulling him closer. Fear is pushing him away. And fear is loud when a man hasn't learned how to trust himself with someone else's heart. This kind of pulling away is not calculated. It's emotional overload. He doesn't know how to hold something precious without fearing he'll drop it. So instead of risking failure, he pauses. Instead of risking vulnerability, he hides. Not because you're wrong, but because you matter too much to lose casually. Understanding this doesn't mean you chase him or excuse mistreatment. It means you stop blaming yourself. His fear is about his capacity, not your worth. When love awakens fear in a man, the real question becomes whether he chooses growth or retreat. And that choice has nothing to do with how lovable you are, and everything to do with how ready he is to face himself. Emotional intensity can awaken wounds a man never knew were still bleeding. When a man loves you deeply, your presence doesn't just bring joy, it brings memory. It brings back moments he thought he buried, feelings he thought he outgrew, and pain he never gave himself permission to process. Love has a way of reopening chapters a man closed without healing, and when that happens, he doesn't always know how to stay present. A man can function for years carrying unspoken hurt. He can work, laugh, succeed, and appear fine on the surface, but deep emotional connection bypasses all of that. It goes straight to the parts of him that learn to protect instead of feel. Your emotional depth, your sensitivity, your awareness. It doesn't attack him, but it exposes him. And exposure can feel like danger to someone who learned early that vulnerability leads to loss. When you love openly, you invite him into emotional space he may have never been allowed to occupy. Some men were taught that emotions are weakness, that expressing pain is failure, that needing someone makes you less of a man. So when you offer emotional safety, his nervous system doesn't always read it as comfort. Sometimes it reads it as unfamiliar territory. And unfamiliar territory triggers survival responses. This is where old wounds wake up. Abandonment from childhood, betrayal from past relationships, moments when he gave his heart and felt humiliated or discarded. Loving you stirs all of that. Suddenly, he's not just loving you, he's reliving every time he loved before and got hurt. And instead of separating past from present, his mind blends them together. So he starts pulling away, not because of something you did, but because being close brings emotional echoes he doesn't know how to quiet. Your affection reminds him of promises that were broken. Your closeness reminds him of times he wasn't chosen. Your expectations remind him of responsibilities he once failed to meet. None of this is conscious. It's emotional memory taking control. This is why reassurance doesn't always work. You can be patient, kind, understanding, and he still retreats because what he's reacting to isn't you. It's the pain attached to intimacy itself. He's trying to protect the version of himself that never recovered from earlier losses. Distance becomes a coping mechanism, a way to regain emotional balance without confronting what hurts. A man in this space may want you and fear you at the same time. He may crave your presence but feel overwhelmed when you're close. Love feels good, but it also feels heavy. It demands emotional work he never learned how to do, so he steps back, hoping the feelings will settle on their own. This doesn't mean the love isn't real. It means the wounds are real too, and until a man is willing to acknowledge, face, and heal what love awakens inside him, emotional intensity will continue to feel like a threat instead of a gift. When a man loves you deeply, the fear of losing control can become stronger than the desire to move closer. Control, for many men, is not about dominance. It's about safety. It's how they've learned to survive the world, manage expectations, and protect their sense of identity. Love challenges the control in a way nothing else can, because when you truly care about someone, you can't predict every outcome anymore. Your heart is no longer fully in your hand. A man who has spent his life being self-reliant, emotionally guarded, or disciplined often prides himself on composure. He knows how to manage work responsibilities and even relationships as long as they stay within boundaries he understands. But deep love doesn't respect those boundaries. It introduces unpredictability. It brings emotions that don't follow logic or schedule. And that loss of emotional control can feel terrifying. When he realizes you have the power to affect his mood, his decisions, his sense of peace, he starts to panic internally. He notices that your approval matters more than he expected. Your absence affects him more than he's comfortable admitting. He starts making emotional decisions instead of rational ones, and that goes against how he's trained himself to function. So instead of leaning in, he steps back to regain control. Pulling away becomes a way to rebalance himself. Distance allows him to breathe, to think, to feel like himself again. It gives him the illusion that he's back in charge of his emotion. This isn't about manipulation or punishment. It's about fear of becoming emotionally dependent on someone else. Many men equate emotional dependence with weakness. Even though it's a natural part of deep connection, there's also the fear of making mistakes. When he loves deeply, every action feels heavier. Every word matters more. He becomes aware that he could hurt you, disappoint you, or fail you. That awareness creates pressure, and pressure, when combined with fear of losing control, makes retreat feel safer than engagement. So he withdraws not because he doesn't want you, but because he doesn't trust himself fully with how much he wants you. He's afraid that loving you will change him in ways he can't reverse. Afraid that if he gives incompletely, he'll lose the version of himself he's always known. Love feels like surrender, and surrender is something he was never taught to do gracefully. This internal struggle often creates confusion on the outside. One day he's present and affectionate. The next he's distant and detached. He's not playing games. He's negotiating with his own fear. He's trying to figure out how to love without feeling out of control. Until a man learns that vulnerability isn't the same as losing power, and that emotional connection doesn't erase his identity, the instinct to pull away will keep surfacing. Love asks him to trust not just you, but himself. And that can be the hardest leap he's ever been asked to take. When a man loves deeply, silence often becomes his shield. Distance is not always absence of feeling. It is sometimes the only way he knows how to protect himself. Many men were never taught how to process intense emotions in real time. They were taught to endure, to suppress, to move forward without looking back. So when love brings emotional weight he doesn't know how to carry, he retreats into what feels familiar, quiet, and space. Silence gives him the illusion of control. When he pulls away, he feels less exposed, less vulnerable, less at risk of saying or doing the wrong thing. Talking would require him to admit confusion, fear, or uncertainty, and those are emotions he may have been trained to avoid. Distance allows him to hide the storm inside without having to explain it. A man in this state is not trying to punish you or manipulate your emotions. He's trying to manage his own. He may genuinely believe that stepping back is the responsible thing to do. In his mind, if he can't show up as his best self, it's safer to show up less. He doesn't want you to see him struggle, doubt himself, or feel overwhelmed. Pride and protection become intertwined. This is why his withdrawal can feel sudden. One moment everything feels connected and warm, and the next there's a shift you can't quite explain. Internally, he reached a point where the emotional intensity exceeded his coping skills. Instead of communicating that, he chose silence. Not because you wouldn't understand, but because he doesn't know how to articulate what's happening within him. Distance also gives him time to think without pressure. When he's away, he can process emotions privately without feeling watched or evaluated. Being close to you makes him aware of your expectations, your needs, and your hopes. That awareness can feel heavy when he's unsure of his capacity to meet them. So he steps back to avoid disappointing you. Unfortunately, this coping mechanism often creates more pain than it prevents. Silence leaves you questioning yourself, wondering what you did wrong, replaying conversations in your head, but his withdrawal is not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of his emotional toolkit or lack of one. For many men, distance is the only language they learn for emotional overwhelm. Until he learns that vulnerability can coexist with strength, silence will remain his refuge. Love challenges him to communicate, to stay present even when it's uncomfortable. But if he hasn't developed that skill yet, pulling away feels like the safest option he knows. When a man loves deeply, the fear of exposure can become overwhelming. Love doesn't just invite affection, it demands honesty, consistency, and accountability. It asks a man to show up not only when it's easy, but when it's uncomfortable. And for a man who has built his identity around strength, independence, or emotional restraint, that level of exposure feels risky. Loving you means he can no longer hide behind charm, distance, or distraction. He has to be seen as he truly is. Your presence makes him aware of his flaws, not because you point them out, but because love naturally raises self-awareness. He starts noticing where he falls short, where he avoids, where he hasn't grown yet. Loving you highlights areas of his life that need work, healing, or maturity. And instead of motivating him, that awareness can trigger shame. Shame is a powerful emotion. It tells a man he is not enough, that he is failing before he even begins. When shame enters the picture, many men don't reach out, they withdraw. They don't ask for support, they isolate. Pulling away becomes a way to avoid being judged, even if the judgment is imagined. A man in this space may fear that if you truly see him, you will eventually leave. He believes distance protects him from rejection. As long as he keeps some emotional space, he can maintain control over how much you know and how much you expect. Being fully present would require him to risk disappointing you, and that feels unbearable. This fear of exposure is often tied to past experiences. Maybe he was criticized when he opened up. Maybe his mistakes were used against him. Maybe vulnerability once cost him love. Those memories shape his behavior even when the present situation is different. Your kindness doesn't erase his conditioning overnight. So instead of leaning into intimacy, he steps back. He convinces himself he needs time, space, or clarity, but underneath that reasoning is a fear of being fully known. Love asks him to bring his whole self to the table, not just the polished parts. And if he doesn't feel safe with his imperfections, he retreats. This withdrawal is not a reflection of your worth or your actions. It's a reflection of his relationship with himself. Until a man learns that being seen does not equal being rejected, exposure will continue to feel dangerous. Deep love challenges him to trust that he can be accepted as he is, not just as who he tries to be. When a man loves deeply, The act of pulling away is often a defense mechanism rather than a rejection. Love at its core is intense, demanding, and transformative. For a man who has spent much of his life protecting himself, guarding his emotions, his pride, and his vulnerabilities, being fully present in a deep relationship can feel like stepping off a cliff without knowing if the ground will hold. The deeper his love, the more intense this internal conflict becomes. A man who loves you madly may start to notice parts of himself he hasn't confronted before. Loving deeply exposes fears, insecurities, and unresolved issues that he may have ignored for years. The very traits that make him a good man, loyalty, sensitivity, dedication, also make him more vulnerable to emotional overwhelm. He begins to question whether he's capable of loving someone at the level they deserve, and that doubt can make him hesitate or pull back. Distance gives him the illusion of control over feelings that suddenly feel unmanageable. When he pulls away, it is often because he feels he is in danger of losing himself in love. Deep connection requires surrender, and surrender is challenging for someone who is used to self-reliance. He fears that if he allows himself to be fully present, he might reveal weaknesses, make mistakes, or fail in ways that hurt both of you. Pulling back feels safer than risking exposure, even if that withdrawal creates confusion or pain for the person he loves. The man's silence or distance is rarely about indifference. Instead, it is a reflection of his inner struggle to balance his emotions with his desire to protect you and himself. Love requires courage, and when a man experiences the intensity of loving deeply, he may feel unprepared to navigate the emotional terrain. He may need space to process his feelings, reflect on his past, or work through insecurities that your love has brought to the surface. This retreat is not a sign that his feelings are fading. It is often a sign that his love is strong but complicated. In many cases, a man who steps back is also wrestling with fear of failure. Loving someone deeply means acknowledging that every decision, every word, and every action carries weight. He knows that missteps could cause hurt, and the pressure of responsibility can be intimidating. By pulling away, he buys time to figure out how to be the man he believes you deserve, even if he is unsure of how to get there. It's his way of coping with the fear that loving fully could expose him to rejection, disappointment, or personal inadequacy. Ultimately, the distance is a reflection of his inner work rather than a reflection of you. Until a man reconciles his fears, insecurities, and past wounds, he may retreat when love feels too profound or too revealing. Pulling away is not a lack of love, but a pause, a moment to gather himself, confront his vulnerabilities, and learn how to love without losing his sense of self. True understanding comes when you realize that a man who deeply loves you may need space to process the weight of his own emotions, and that space is often a precursor to a stronger, more conscious, and more committed love.